with different companies. She's several industries. She's worked with clients like Procter & Gamble, like Masr Italia, like GIZ, like Votem, like Sony, like Rise Up. So it's very interesting the cocktail of experiences she has in industries she's been through. And she'll be taking us through PR in the digital era. So I leave the floor to Alla. Alla will be asking you a question to start with, and then she'll be taking you through the presentations. A few rules I'd like just to set at the beginning is once the presentation starts, I'll be asking you to mute the voices of your computer and to close your cameras to ensure that everything goes smoothly. And by the end of the presentation, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And if you want to raise your hand and ask your question to Alla, just raise your hand and we'll be accommodating to that. So let me leave the floor to Alla. Alla, please. Alla, I think your voice is muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry.
It's okay. We can hear
Can
you
you
now.
hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's perfect.
Great.
Yes.
So, thank
Your voice has gone once more.
It's very strange.
Yes, now we can
No,
hear
Alla,
you.
you're fine. You just need to raise your voice a bit. We can hear you. Just raise your voice. Can I kindly ask you to keep your mics muted? Oh, now you're muted, Alla. A second ago, you were not muted.
Sorry, can you
Yes,
hear me
that's
now?
perfect. Yeah, I can hear you. Excellent.
Yeah, I've been getting notifications that someone is muting me, probably by mistake.
Okay, we're good to go.
All right, great.
Yours, Alla.
طيب. Thank you very much for the beautiful introduction, May. Beautiful morning, everyone. I'm extremely excited to be here today to talk to you about one of the most important topics being discussed now in PR, how we can adapt our communication strategies and channels to the new modes of technology, and how we can, what is the next generation of PR, what are the tools that we can use, and how we can integrate in general technology and the digital world with PR. So just a brief introduction about myself and the company I work for. I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer of Publicist Inc. As May has mentioned, I have over 15 years of experience across a wide span of industries and disciplines, including strategic communications consulting, digital execution, and media outreach for various clients in different sectors, in technology, healthcare, fashion, government, so you name it. We are also a bit of background on Publicist Inc. We are a local company that was founded in 2011. We started with a team of only 2 individuals. Next year, we will be celebrating our 10-year anniversary, servicing over 100 clients with a team of 22 professionals. We have currently 2 global affiliations with international PR agencies. So we're basically acting as their local partners in Egypt. And we currently manage the communications of brands like Uber, Adidas, Netflix, Oppo, and we just won Spotify a few days ago. So this is just a brief background of who we are and what we do. Now, without further ado, I would like to start by asking a question to the audience about their expectations and what their definition, what what they believe PR is.
So if you can just raise your hands and I'll be taking you.
If I can't see any raised hands, probably because of the privacy policy. طيب, let me start by my personal definition of what PR is, but give me a second to share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
It's great, Alla.
Yes.
Okay. So my personal definition is PR is basically about winning hearts and minds. PR is about creating brand advocates and evangelists that would organically engage in positive conversations about your brand. So it's creating a lot of advocates for your brand on digital media and on traditional media. This is my personal definition of what PR is. Now, going back to the classic question of what is the difference between PR and advertising. Personally, I've been spending the last 5 minutes talking about my experience and skills and flaunting my agency experience. So basically, I've been really doing a lot of advertising about myself. But my question is, does it really matter to you as audience who are present in this presentation? Probably, maybe yes, but maybe not. However, what if Publicist Inc. has been recommended to you by a friend or a work professional? Will it matter then? I would guess probably yes, which is basically fundamentally the difference between both disciplines, between the advertising and public relations. So in advertising, you talk about yourself. You talk about how great you are. You talk about how you're the best in the specific field. With public relations, people talk about how great you are. People talk about um, how uh, uh, how you're leading the market with expert advice, or how you're leading the market uniquely. So it's not you talking about yourself; it's other people vouching for you and talking about your unique differentiators. So let's have a look at how brands have been integrating both advertising and public relation disciplines and creating organic conversations about their brands on not just traditional forms of media, but also on social media, which is typically what PR 2.0 is all about. I don't know if you followed this campaign by McDonald's. This was a campaign that was launched by McDonald's 2 years ago. It was a CSR campaign to promote adult literacy. So what McDonald's did was basically install donation boxes in all of McDonald's premises. But there was a small glitch or يعني a mistake. The irony is that they produced donation boxes that had a terrible spelling mistake. The donation box basically had صندوق تطوير التعليم, and it had a horrible Arabic mistake. Sorry, someone I think is can you please mute your mics? Okay, thank you. So McDonald's spelling mistake was first announced to the public by a celebrity artist, Zeb Sarwat, who tweeted about the mistake and wrote about how McDonald's, the irony of McDonald's launching a campaign to promote adult literacy when they have made a terrible spelling mistake in their donation box. And people started joining the conversations online, attacking McDonald's and kind of socially trolling their social media platforms. To later discover that this was a genius PR campaign, what we'd like to call a 2.0 PR-led campaign that focused on generating a lot of organic conversations online about the brand. So يعني this was actually a genius trick that McDonald's used to create a story and a narrative to make people talk about McDonald's on social. This campaign was later supported by a huge above-the-line campaign, which made a huge hit, generating millions of views and impressions in just a few hours. So this is an example of a campaign that integrated both PR and advertising and utilized new technologies like social media to encourage people to spark conversations and talk about the brand. I don't know if you've also followed the campaign by Cadbury, إحنا الفضائيين. That was also a very smart campaign for Cadbury. But let me tell you a bit of background. When Cadbury launched this campaign, they launched they launched an above-the-line campaign with aliens. They thought that was a very cute campaign and it would resonate well with their audience. What they didn't realize is that people, it really backfired and people really hated the aliens. They thought they were scary and they were ugly. So as a comeback, what McDonald's did was a genius PR campaign. They basically collaborated with the social media team of To-Do, the brand, the chocolate brand, and To-Do kind of created and sparked online conversations and made fun of these aliens. Once this happened, يعني a lot of organic conversations and brands jumped on this movement, and there was a whole movement about إحنا الفضائيين and a lot of conversations that drove positive conversations for the brand. So this is a genius campaign of a campaign that actually started on the wrong foot, but how the brand managed to tweak the campaign and to kind of make fun of it and draw and spark conversations on social media to change the perceptions on the campaign. These are some of the posts that were made by different brands and how brands like Kareem and Bake Rolls tried to newsjack and ride this wave and gain more coverage and momentum by initially making fun of these aliens with the campaign إحنا الفضائيين. طيب, clearly the lines between advertising and PR has become very blurred. So يعني originally advertising is the classic distinction between advertising and PR is that advertising usually involves one-way communications, whereas PR involves a dialogue. It's a conversation. It's more of a conversation. And now with social media and the digital world, PR has become a little more complicated, because it's now not just a dialogue between your brand and your target audience, but it's like a conversation between many stakeholders together. So we're moving from a dialogue into a conversation by many to many. So originally advertising is a very forced measure. PR is a discipline that wins hearts and minds. So it's more credible. It comes from the people, by the people, to the people. Advertising is purely paid. You have full control over the content of your campaign. With PR, you have very little control over your content. Most of the coverage that you create is earned and very long-lived. So let's look back on how the father of modern PR managed to win hearts and minds. So the father of modern PR is Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays, by the way, is the nephew of Sigmund Freud. So what he did was he tried to combine his uncle's psychoanalytical ideas with ideas related to with ideas of social psychologists to try to influence public opinion. Some of his earliest campaigns that he's very well known for are the Torches of Freedom. So in the 20s era, Bernays used to work for the American Tobacco Company, which was a tobacco company that owned a brand called Lucky Strike. In the 20s, it was back then. Smoking was women were not allowed to smoke in public, or they were allowed, but it was generally very much frowned upon, and it was not publicly accepted for women to smoke in public. So Bernays, trying to, of course, increase the market share of his company, he tried to change public perceptions to try to gain more market share from the sector. So what he came up with a very genius idea. He decided to to hire a group of young models and to march in New York City. He then called a group of the press, told them that there are women activists that will march the city and will light what is called the Torches of Freedom. They didn't know what the Torches of Freedom were, but it was later discovered that the Torches of Freedom were the Lucky Strike cigarettes that the brand that he used to work for. So while the young models marched, he signaled to his models to light the cigarettes, and in front of the eager photographers, the media took coverage of women, these models, very pretty models, lighting the torches of freedom, which are basically cigarettes. Of course, this campaign helped to break the taboo against women smoking in public, and did not just earn him thousands of dollars in free publicity, but he really changed perceptions around smoking in general. Bernays برضو he was the mastermind behind overthrowing a democratically elected president of Guatemala in the 50s. Just to give you a brief background of the time back then, in the 50s, Guatemala was going through a revolution, much like the revolution we had in 2011. So they had a very corrupt government that did a lot of labor exploitation. Now Bernays was consulting for a company, a multinational company named United Fruit Company, which is now a company known by the name of Chiquita. So this company lost a lot of business due to Guatemala ending exploitative labor measures. And so it wasn't in the best interest of this company for the democratically elected president to remain in power. So what Bernays did was actually create a propaganda against this newly elected president, and he branded him as a communist, which fueled a huge coup against him that overthrew his leadership. So really, although this is a really, really bad example of what PR should stand for, but what Bernays is trying to teach us is that PR is really about telling great stories. And people love great stories. They have done so throughout history. And today, with our digital complexity, I'm sure Bernays would have steered public opinions through different means like technology and social media. So just fast forwarding from the 20s and 50s to today, and one of the most watched and streamed YouTube video. I'm sure you all agree with me that this is really, really mind-boggling and bizarre. That a video by an unknown artist would gain around 500 million YouTube views and would receive tweets from Elon Musk. طيب, what does this tell us? It basically tells us that the stories and the conversations of today are just more random than anyone can imagine, and that most viral conversations that are online are very unpredictable. You never really know what will be the next big hit until after it's really happened. So nowadays, consumers are experiencing incredible thrills at the unbelievable amount of free content that they can access by the click of their mouse. And the brands who are first to ride on this trend and kind of build on this trend are the ones that have created a lot of engaging digital content and that have won big time, like brands like Red Bull and brands who were first to move to the digital world. Adding a bit of context, how did we move from the father of modern PR, Bernays, to Hassan Shakoush وبنت الجيران? Let us give you a bit of background of what is happening nowadays. طبعا it is absolutely no surprise that the digital world has taken the entire world by storm, and Egypt is no exception to that. If you can see my screen, you'll notice that almost half of the Egyptian population are active internet users who spend half of their waking hours on the internet, whether streaming videos on demand or checking their social media handles. So this is a great, huge movement that has happened. And this is what the consumption of media and content stands as of today. 39% of the population are on Facebook, 97% watching videos online, 39% streaming TV, music, and so on and so forth. So how brands are coping with these changes? Brands are trying to always fighting to create viral content. How do they do that? They try to create a lot of compelling story narratives that spark organic conversations on social media, in the hopes of really generating genuine content and real buy-in from their various stakeholders. طيب, here are some examples of campaigns we personally worked on at Publicist Inc. So one of our clients is Netflix, and one of the publicity campaigns that we worked on was for an animation movie called The Willoughbys. So the intent of our PR campaign was to highlight that Netflix is bringing back Egyptian dubbing. طبعا during the 90s and 90s era, Egypt was very much known for dubbing animation movies. We wanted to revive this and brand Netflix that it's bringing back this whole Egyptian dubbing. What we did was we worked very closely with Mohammed Hinedi's social media team. We tried to pitch him the idea of sharing the trailer of Willoughbys and talking about how Netflix is bringing back Egyptian dubbing, and how this is a great opportunity for the entertainment sector in general. This was a huge hit for us, securing millions in impressions and views, and generating excellent engagement. Of course, this was all unpaid, purely publicity-led campaign with absolutely no payment. Another example of a publicity campaign that we created for one of our TV shows. So we wanted to work with the TV series Away. The TV series was starring Hilary Swank. It's a series that talks about the conflict of a female astronaut, the conflict that she experiences between her role as a mother and her role as a female astronaut. So what happened is we were asked by the global team to nominate media to take part in a press junket. Which is like a series of media interviews with the stars and the talents of the show. So junkets usually are traditionally led by press. However, we thought that there is a huge opportunity to create very engaging stories with Omar Samra through Omar Samra's channel. Because he's been selected as an astronaut candidate himself, And because of his very, very close relevance to the show's topic and the story, with his own experience. So what we did is we engaged in an online interview between Hilary Swank and Omar Samra. The outcome was amazing, brilliant. The show, the interview was promoted on Omar Samra's channels completely free of charge, and it created a lot of brilliant publicity for the show. And this is basically an example of how we can integrate different forms of media and new forms of media with publicity and PR. So what are the major trends shaping the future? Big data, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, automation, machine learning. These are all huge trends that are not just shaping the world, it's shaping the entire, every industry you can think of. I'm sure you're wondering how this will shape the field of communications and PR. Before I explain how, I'll just invite you to take a few seconds to really look at this slide. This is the amount of data that we don't just create, but we exchange in just one day. So you're talking about 59 billion emails exchanges every day. So can you imagine how much data we exchange and we consume in the span of a year? It's mind-boggling. So as communication professionals, can you imagine what it would be like to attempt to measure a brand's sentiment or just analyze conversations about your brand following this huge amount of data being exchanged in just one day? Can you also imagine what kind of messages you can create or campaigns that cuts through this huge clutter? It sounds like it's pretty impossible, right? I think it is pretty impossible without the use of the new technology and machine learning and big data in analyzing all the social media conversations and the data that is exchanged between individuals. So what are how can we use machine learning and big data in our PR campaigns? We can use them to predict crises and issues before they even happen, to suggest courses of action based on the appearance of certain issues. We can use big data and machine learning to predict campaign success or the lack of, and to suggest alternative courses of action. We can use artificial intelligence to create very tailored and very tailored messages to each of our stakeholder groups. So this is what PR will look like in the future. And with the huge amount of data that is exchanged, not just every day, but every hour, there is no way we can move on and continue to position ourselves and to cut across the clutter without the use of big data and machine learning and all these new technologies. So the question is, where do we start? How do you develop your PR strategy? First, you need to really understand your landscape. You need to understand what are the latest technologies or market trends that you can integrate into your communications plan. how you will communicate during sensitive times, like times of global pandemics, political unrest, or even economic recessions or major world events. You need to follow these major events because they impact your business, they impact your communications, and you need to consider it in the future in your communications plan. You also need to understand where do you stand against your competition. You need to try to understand and analyze what your unique differentiators are versus competition. What are competition? Sorry. Sorry. So, what are competitors saying about themselves? What channels do they use to promote themselves? What are they claiming they're good about? You also need to understand what are your current tools. What are the tools that you own that you can use in your own communications? So how do you understand your landscape? There are a lot of tools that you can use to try to understand your landscape. Number one is to listen to what people are saying on social media about your brand and about competition. So engage in a lot of social listening is the number one step to try to understand your landscape. Also reading the news and monitoring how competitors are positioning themselves. What are the stories they are creating? What are the key messages that they are promoting about themselves? Also, it would be worthwhile to engage in different quantitative and qualitative research with either traditional media or consumers to try to understand their perceptions of your brand and their perceptions of competitors. Also, you need to define your brand objective. Is it to build brand equity, or is it to create thought leadership expertise, or is it to raise general awareness about a specific topic? So we've worked with a number of clients from day zero. More often than not, clients come up to us after a month after the launch and tell us that our sales are going down. Something must be wrong. Well, we tell them no, nothing is wrong. Your expectations are wrong. PR and brand building are very, very long-term goals. Do you really want to be the talk of town today and be forgotten tomorrow? No, I guess not. So you need to build consistency, and you need to build a long-term vision towards your communications plan. So you also need to define your topic, what you're gonna converse about, what is your area of expertise. So as an example, Adidas has obviously defined their conversation or their platform in music, sports, and gaming. As you can see, they created a lot of visuals and a lot of campaigns with Lego, with music professionals. And they've been very playful with their collaborations with brands like Lego. So you also need to define your platform. But the question is, how do you choose a platform? You choose a platform by prioritizing your audience. For Adidas, they've defined their audience as being the Generation Z, who are the young, carefree creatives, the hippies, the trendy and adrenaline junkies. That's typically who they target, and that's who they want to focus on. However, someone like me, I buy Adidas, but I don't fit in any of these profiles. The question is Adidas going to develop a strategy to target people like me? I really don't think so. So we meet a lot of organizations who either have no idea who their customers are or just want to target everyone. Your communication strategy needs to be tailored to your most important audience segment. You can create multiple strategies for multiple audiences. This is great, but you'll probably break the bank in a matter of months, and then you'll give up the whole idea because it will be too costly for you to be consistent and survive. So my personal recommendation is to always put communications in context. You also need to identify your platforms. What are the traditional platforms that you will deploy, and what are the digital platforms you will also deploy? And what are the platforms that you already own, and what are the platforms that you're willing to pay for, like influencers and community groups on social media? And let's stop thinking about our social media strategy separately from our offline activations and media relations strategy. You just need to develop one overarching communication strategy that kind of fuels your entire brand communications. And that's really how you will get consistency, longevity, and brand love for your brand. But here's a big surprise for you, because to create a powerful, long-term, intelligent communications plan, you will need to make an investment. And the investment will be in long-term relationships with your different stakeholders and long-term communications. So marketers need to really stop thinking about their next big achievement of the quarter and start really thinking about the huge potential for the rest of their brand's life. You also need to be on the lookout for new tools or platforms. TikTok, for example, has grown in a matter of just a few months to be one of the most consumed platform in Egypt, with a swooping 7.5 million users. طبعا thanks to the lockdown and the quarantine, these numbers have greatly exponentially grown. So you always need to be integrate new forms of media in your communications to be the first mover in this area and sphere. Always create story narratives that resonates and wins hearts and minds, because obviously those who tell the best stories are those who rule the world, as we've talked about the Bernays communications and how his storytelling campaigns. So the measurement criteria you will develop will really depend on your brand and communication objectives. So if your brand and communication objectives is to change perceptions about your brand, you need to really measure brand perceptions at the beginning of your campaigns and try to measure the brand perceptions at the end of your campaign, and try to measure the difference. This is the only way you will be able to give a fair assessment of whether your PR campaign worked or not. So my recommendation is to really choose the right measurement criteria based on your communication and brand objective. And you need to look at more long-term criteria that can be tied to business results, and not just focus on how many coverage pieces you're getting or how many impressions you're getting. طيب, I'd like to take you very briefly on a campaign that we created for one of our clients. So very briefly, we were contracted by Medel. Medel is a client that works in the field of hearing loss. So what they do is they produce something called cochlear ear implants that are given to young individuals who have hearing problems. And it allows them to regain back their hearing. So when we started working with Medel, sorry, can you go on mute? I'm sorry. Thank you. So when we first started working with Medel, we did a landscape assessment, and we noticed that we had a very stagnant market. People knew very little about hearing loss. There was very little public awareness about hearing loss. People didn't know the expense involved to treat kids with severe hearing loss. And the decision makers in Egypt were very fragmented, and there weren't clear stakeholders that we can communicate to try to develop this market. For Medel, we identified the vision, and we set specific communication objectives for them. Our vision was to try to eradicate hearing loss in Egypt by developing the entire ecosystem around hearing care to drive conversations around the cause. So what we did was we tried to engage in conversations with our target audience, whether the government, doctors, or public figures, to try to draw attention to our cause and to try to create more awareness about what hearing loss was, how you can treat kids with hearing loss. And what we did was a consumer interfacing campaign. We named it Isma'ni. We created a social media and digital platform for Isma'ni to communicate the struggles of kids with severe hearing loss. We did a lot of collaborations with NGOs. We collaborated with Masr al Khair, that performed a lot of hearing assessment tests in different governorates to try to raise awareness about hearing loss. We also collaborated with a lot of influencers who went online and went on TV and talked about hearing loss. We also identified Yusra Lozi, a celebrity artist who had her daughter who suffered from hearing loss. So we talked with her. We asked her to be the ambassador of our campaign, and we asked her to engage in media interviews and conversations about the struggles that she faces with her daughter. The outcome was enormous because conversations started appearing about hearing loss. People started being aware about cochlear ear implants, and a lot of donation campaigns sparked to start collecting donations for hearing loss. We also collaborated with the TV hosts زي عمرو أديب, who we invited to experience technology centers and the innovation centers of our client in Austria. So he visited these technology centers. He made interviews with the founding team of Medel. and he dedicated a whole episode on hearing loss. And he did a huge donation campaign drawing around 16 million in donations for hearing loss. So our measurement impact was directly impacting market growth by around 20%. And this is the true measure and impact of PR in the digital world today. Did we manage to win hearts and minds? I don't know, but I will leave you to decide if we managed to do so or not. This wraps up my presentation. I'd like to really thank you for sticking around, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question.
So please raise your hands now if you would like to ask, or just type your question in the chat and we will be accommodating to them. So let's see what we have. So Alla, your first question is, so you have someone who Shady answered your first question. He said, PR is a persuasion business. You're trying to convince an audience inside your building or town and outside your usual sphere of influence to promote your idea, purchase your product, support your position, or recognize your accomplishments. So this was Shady. And then you have a question from Inji. Is the 59 billion emails day globally on a regional or global?
It's on a global level. I can share with you the references if you're interested. But yes, this is on a global level. It's pretty amazing the amount of messages that we exchange, not on a daily level, but on a minute-by-minute level.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Anyone would like to raise their hand and ask directly, Annette?
Yes, please. I would like to know, how did you make the choice of the influencers?
You mean for the campaign, for the hearing loss campaign?
Yes, because when you choose influencers, you're choosing how, like, the figures that will fit into the message you're trying to deliver. So I just wanted to make sure, like, how did you choose them?
Very good question, Hannah. The way we chose them, we identified who would be relevant to our story. So we did our research and we found that Yusra Lozi, the celebrity artist, had a daughter that had a severe hearing loss problem, but she never talked about it in public. So we reached out to her. We tried to convince her that to be the face of our campaign, because it's a very relevant topic to her. She was very motivated to do that because she had a stake. She wanted to help other kids who have the same issue. And she tried to explain how she kind of knew that her kid had a hearing problem and the challenges she had and the process she had to go through. So it was very relevant to our story, and it gave our story a different spin completely. يعني it drove our story from a small story to the masses with absolutely zero advertising budget, just because we were able to get the endorsement and support of a top celebrity like Yusra Lozi.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you have another question from Perry Ale, and she's asking you, how do you reach influencers and do they get paid?
We work with a lot of influencers on different brands. Good question, by the way. Some influencers are very commercial. And some of the brands and some of the stories that we create are the trick is to try to create story narratives that would encourage the collaboration of influencers in an unpaid model. Yani, for example, when we worked with Netflix and we tried to get the endorsement of حد زي محمد هنيدي, of course, we had no intention of paying him and we did not pay him. But we wanted to play on something that would really resonate with him. He as a celebrity star, he used to do dubbing for animation movies. So we identified him as a relevant stakeholder and influencer for our campaign. We reached out to his team and tried to convince him that this is a very nice and relevant message to his character. So that's how we gained his endorsement without any payment. My advice is, when you reach out to influencers, try to create story narratives that would really engage them. Because if they're engaged with the brand, if they're engaged with your story, they would endorse your brand without payment. However, if you engage them with a very commercial story or in a narrative that does not interest them, they will definitely ask for payment.
Thank you, Alla. Another question. What are the PR KPIs? Are there any? Can you share them with us?
As I discussed earlier, there isn't a one size fits all. So your KPIs needs to be set according to your communication objectives. If your communication objectives is to change perceptions about your brand, you need to first understand that this is a long-term process that does not happen overnight. It happens over a long period of time. So, and if this is your communication objective, you need to, at the onset of your campaign, try to measure your brand perception, whether through quantitative or qualitative research. And after you finish the campaign, or at specific intervals in your plan, repeat this exercise and try to measure the difference. Have you gained more endorsement from your clients? Have your brand perception, did you improve your brand perception or not? So the KPIs, the normal KPIs is the coverage and the impressions is not really a real measure of your PR campaign success. The real measure is you need to benchmark it against the communication objectives that you set at the beginning of your campaign.
Thank you, Alla. And then you have another question from Angie. She's asking you if you could share the reference of the statistics you were talking about for the digital movement. And then Shady has another question for you. Is there any place for new technologies like artificial intelligence in the PR arena in Egypt?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I was trying to explain with the future of communications and PR. The future of communications entails machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data. Some of the uses is how to speak to your audiences. We have multiple stakeholders and multiple audience. You want to talk to your audience.
Oh, please mute your voice.
You want to talk to your audience in a way that resonates with them. The future of PR is how you can integrate artificial intelligence to create multiple messages to multiple stakeholders based on the interests of your stakeholders and target audience. So if your audience are interested in music and you're an entertainment brand, you will tailor your message to your audience using that platform. These are some of the uses of new technology and artificial intelligence with PR. There are multiple uses. Yani, can you imagine if we use artificial intelligence to target media, for instance, talking their language, pitching your story to media in a language that is very much relevant to them and resonates with them, tailoring your message to each individual you reach out to. This is how in the future how artificial intelligence and machine learning will be integrated with PR. And I believe it's very necessary.
And then you have another question, and I think we're running short on time. So if you have any questions, please just just put them down, because I'll need to close in like 5 minutes max. So you have, what's the difference between PR and brand management? That's a tough one.
Yeah. Yani, I think PR is just a small part of brand management. Communications in general is an element of brand management. Brand management entails a lot of other elements like brand positioning, creatively designing and promoting your brand. It's a much bigger discipline and entails advertising. It entails social media management, digital buying. It entails a lot of other elements. Communication is just one of the elements تحت brand management.
If I'm allowed to add, so what we're doing across these webinars for the asker is we're just trying to cover the different disciplines of marketing. So last webinar, we talked about digital. Digital is part of brand management. And today we're talking about PR. It's part of brand management. We'll be talking about research and customer experience. It's part of brand management. So your brand is the big umbrella. And then underneath your big umbrella, you begin to fit the different disciplines that have a lot of science in them. But at the end of the day, they're there to make your brand stand somewhere. So each one has a little piece to play for the picture to be complete. And for sure, PR is one of these sciences that is entailed for your brand to stand wherever you need it to stand. So let's see what other questions you have. Okay, so someone needs your contact, so that should be possible. And someone needs the presentation, also that should be possible. We've put down the mobile and the email of Alla, so anyone can get in contact with her. She's already jotted it down. Any other questions before I wrap up this session? So I guess we're good to go. It's like 1 and 10 minutes, and I think we promised people we don't go too far above time. So Alla, I would like to thank you very much for making our third webinar come to reality. It was a very interesting session, and it's for sure one of the very important disciplines of marketing. We can't do a great job in marketing without having the PR properly done. So thank you very much for coming over. And we hope to see you soon in some other session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for being with us today. We hope you enjoyed the session. And we will see you very soon in our fourth webinar. So stay tuned. And if you have any recommendations or topics you want to be covered, please drop Sherry a line. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.